I apologize also to our guest, David Carden, who I know is waiting patiently. After you're done with me, we will hear from David Carden, who, as you know, is the Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria crisis. He will be briefing us remotely from Gaziantep in Turkey as his mandate, as post comes to an end. Also, programming note, I want to flag that on Wednesday, that is the day after tomorrow, at 8 a.m., as part of their joint strategy leading up to the COP30 UN Climate Conference, the Secretary General and President Lula of Brazil will convene a small but representative groups of heads of states and government for a virtual closed-door meeting to discuss strengthening global efforts to tackle the climate crisis and to accelerate the just energy transition. The Secretary General is expected to have a stakeout with you after that, and that'll be around 10 a.m. on Wednesday. We'll give you the exact location of where that will take place. On tomorrow, ahead of the meeting with the Secretary General's special ahead of that meeting, there will be a background briefing at 8 a.m., and that will be with a joint briefing with the Secretary General's Special Advisor on Climate, Selwyn Hart, whom you know well, and Ambassador Correa do Lago, the Secretary for Climate, Energy, and Environment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, and more importantly, he is also the COP30 president. That will take place tomorrow. Invites have been sent to you, so you'll have the exact time and location. As you know, the Secretary General joins the world in mourning the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis, a messenger of hope, of humility, and of humanity. The Secretary General said the Pope was a transcendent voice for peace, human dignity, and social justice, leaving behind a legacy of faith, of service, and of compassion for all, especially those left on the margins of life or trapped by the horrors of conflict. Our divided and discordant world will be a much better place if we follow his example of unity and mutual understanding in our own actions, the Secretary General said. Speaking at the stakeout just an hour ago, the Secretary General added that many of us find great meaning in the Pope's final Easter message that was delivered just yesterday. He appealed for us not to yield to, as he called it, the, quote, logic of fear. Instead, he urged the world to invest in what he referred to as the weapons of peace and to help the most vulnerable to fight hunger and to advance development. The Secretary General spoke also earlier this morning by phone to the Papal Nuncio, the representative of the Permanent Observer State of the Holy See, to the United Nations, to offer his deepest condolences to Catholics and to all those around the world inspired by the extraordinary life and examples of Pope Francis. Also this morning, the Secretary General spoke at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. He said that the difficulties facing Indigenous peoples around the world are an affront to dignity and justice and a source of deep sorrow for him personally. The Secretary General noted that everywhere Indigenous peoples are on the front lines of climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, despite having done nothing to create these crises and everything to stop them. He pointed out that eviction and illegal exploitation continue to harm Indigenous peoples and grossly violate their right, and where they face marginalization, discrimination, unemployment, economic disadvantage, and horrendous violence. The Secretary General also stressed that government must honor their obligations in the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples without delay and bring Indigenous peoples, particularly women, in all forms of decision-making. He also urged countries and companies to do more to work with us to deliver all the recommendations of the panel of the critical energy transition minerals, adding that we will soon launch the high-level expert advisory group to accelerate action on benefit sharing, value addition, and fair trade, and to make sure that the needs and inputs of Indigenous communities will be key. His remarks were shared with you. Turning to Sudan, as you know, we have been warning of the horrifying reports that we're getting from El Fasher and Zamzam camp in North Darfur State. Those horrendous reports include the killings, sexual violence, and huge displacement, as well as the massive humanitarian needs of all those who are there. Today, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, spoke by phone separately with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan of the Sudanese Armed Forces and with General Abdel Rahim Dagalo of the Rapid Support Forces, who is the second in command of the RSF forces. He noted their commitments to give full access to get aid in. The Undersecretary General stressed that we are mobilized to reach and support civilians. Our humanitarian colleagues also warned that the situation is further compounded by rising levels of food insecurity, placing people at a heightened risk of malnutrition and famine. Over the weekend, we will have seen that the statement issued by the resident humanitarian coordinator on Sudan, Clementine Nkweta Salami, warning that the humanitarian community in Sudan has faced critical and intensifying operational challenges in North Darfur, driven by forced and large-scale displacement of civilians from established infrastructure and humanitarian services. We continue to call on all parties to the conflict to respect international humanitarian aid, humanitarian law, and we urge donors to provide rapid and flexible funding to maintain the humanitarian response in North Darfur. Merci. Turning to the situation in Yemen, we note with continued concern the airstrikes conducted by the United States on Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen over the course of the 17th and 18th of April in and around the port of Ras Isa. And of course, you'll have seen the statement we issued on that over the weekend. Our humanitarian colleagues say that 5 humanitarian workers were confirmed injured in the strikes on Ras Isa port. There have also been initial reports of more than 230 casualties, including 80 people killed. OCHA says humanitarian assistance was immediately mobilized to support local health facilities, including health, trauma centers, and emergency surgery, as well as surgical supplies. At fire, the port is reported to have been extinguished this morning, though we remain deeply concerned of the reports of a fuel leak into the Red Sea. We also remain deeply concerned about the ongoing missile and drone strikes conducted by the Houthis against Israel and in the Red Sea, and call on the Houthis to cease such attacks immediately. Security Council Resolution 2768 related to the Houthi attacks against merchant and commercial vessels must be fully respected. We also reiterate the call for the utmost restraint and a cessation of all military activities in and around Yemen. Our colleagues on the ground continue to engage with relevant parties in this respect. We reiterate that any additional escalation may further destabilize Yemen and the region and pose a grave risk to the already dire humanitarian situation. Today, as part of its mandated activities, the UN mission to support the Hudaydah Agreement conducted a patrol to Ras Isa port and noted significant structural damage to the port and destruction of facilities. Tomorrow, the UN mission there plans to deploy another patrol to Hudaydah port to assess the situation there. As mandated, the UN mission is actively engaging with stakeholders to foster dialogue and explore solutions to de-escalate the situation in the Hudaydah Governorate. We emphasize that international law, including international humanitarian law as applicable, must be respected at all times and appeal to all to respect and protect civilians as well as civilian infrastructure. We also reiterate the call for the immediate and unconditional release of all UN and other personnel arbitrarily detained by the Houthis. And just to flag that yesterday, the Special Envoy for the Secretary General for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, called for credible guarantee to protect the Red Sea from becoming a prolonged area of conflict, deeming such assurances are essential not just for global security, but to keep Yemen sliding further away from peace. And also our humanitarian colleagues warn that the latest violence threatens to worsen the already humanitarian situation in Yemen, where more than 19 million human beings need vital aid to address widespread hunger, disease, and protection needs. Children are especially vulnerable. A measles outbreak in Marib Governorate has continued to surge with more than 240 confirmed cases and over a dozen child deaths this year. Sustained public health intervention are critical to manage and prevent such outbreaks, which in turn requires predictable funding and access for partners on the ground. Despite hostilities and other challenges, we and our humanitarian partners in Yemen are delivering wherever we can. So far this year, our partners have been mobilizing food assistance for almost 6 million people. They've supported more than 500 health facilities, providing life-saving primary, secondary health services to some 225,000 men, women, and children. Turning to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, today marks 50 days since the Israeli authorities have completely blocked incoming supplies of any kind into the Gaza Strip. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that since early March, not a single truck carrying food, fuel, medicine, or any other essentials have been allowed in, no matter how critical they are for people's survival. Over the past 50 days, food stocks have run dangerously low, rations have been cut, critical medicines, vaccines, and medical supplies are all running low. Ambulances have had to scale back life-saving services because there's almost no fuel to power these ambulances. Cooking gas has disappeared from markets. Bakeries have been forced to shut down. And we, and along with our humanitarian partners, have run out of tents to deliver to people who need them. Some of our warehouses inside Gaza have been made inaccessible due to the forced displacement orders. OCHA warns that the impact of the full block of this continued blocking of humanitarian aid is devastating. Children and adults alike are going hungry. Access to health care is falling apart. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people have been newly displaced. Attacks on civilians, including emergency teams and aid workers, have surged again. And following yesterday's Israeli statement on the findings of their internal investigation into the killings of first responders in Rafah, we've taken note that a commander was dismissed based on those findings. It is clear that too many civilians, including aid workers, have been killed in Gaza. Their stories have not all made headlines. We're all once again calling for the protection of civilians, for the atrocities to end, for the hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza to be released, and for Gaza to open up and for a ceasefire to be reinstated. Turning to UNIFIL, our peacekeepers in southern Lebanon tell us that since the cessation of hostilities agreement came into force on the 27th of November of last year, UNIFIL has carried out some 34 clearance operations in South Lebanon, removing over 90 unexploded ordnances and improvised explosive devices. These operations have been essential in making roads accessible for patrols, logistics, and humanitarian missions, while supporting the Lebanese Armed Forces redeployment in the area. The Lebanese Armed Forces, since April 1st, UNIFIL has been conducting an average of 7 vehicle patrols each day along the Blue Line, along with the Lebanese Army. These patrols were suspended since late September due to the escalation of hostilities. UNIFIL continues to support the Lebanese Armed Forces in its redeployment to about 120 positions in the south of the Litani River. Since March 24th, UNIFIL has discovered 13 weapons caches, bringing the total to 223 caches of weapons found by UNIFIL south of the Litani since November 27th. The mission continues to support the Lebanese Army in fulfilling its obligations under Resolution 1701 and continues to urge the IDF to fully withdraw from the Lebanese territory in compliance with Resolution 1701. UNIFIL reminds all actors to avoid any activities that could put the current fragile stability at risk. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that escalating violence continues to harm civilians in the east of the country. In North Kivu province, partners estimate that more than 2,300 people fled clashes between armed groups in the Kubua area of Walikale territory on 15th April. Violence also continues to escalate in Ituri province, with 3 civilians reportedly killed by armed men on April 16th in Urumu territory. Elsewhere in Ituri, armed groups raided the Nyoka hospital in Mahagi territory and assaulted hospital staff as well as local authorities. Medical staff have been relocated away from the area due to rising insecurity, forcing the hospital to suspend medical service for 18,000 people. Despite challenges, our humanitarian partners have continued to deliver aid across affected provinces. In the first 2 months of 2025, humanitarian partners delivered assistance reaching 2.4 million people across the DRC. Meanwhile, the cholera outbreak in Tanganyika province continues to spread. Health authorities are reporting a weekly average of 120 cases, new cholera cases since January, and our colleagues say response efforts are severely hampered by the lack of treatment supplies. And in Haiti, here in New York, the head of our UN Integrated Office for Haiti, Marie-Isabelle Salvador, briefed the Security Council on the situation there. She said that since her last briefing, the security situation in the country has worsened, with organized criminal groups having launched attacks to expand territorial control and undermine state authority. Attacks also spread across the West Center and Artibonite department, signaling a strategy to strengthen national security forces. The scale and duration of this violence overwhelmed the Haitian National Police, despite support from the armed forces of Haiti and the multinational security support mission, further obstructing stabilization, she said. Ms. Salvador urged the members of the Council to step up international support for Haiti, saying it's more critical than ever, particularly through increased funding and operational capacity for the multinational security support mission. She also called for sufficient and predictable funding for UN operations. Without it, she said, we risk further reduction of our work at a time when the country needs us most. And turning to Myanmar, our colleagues there tell us that more than 3 weeks after the 2 earthquakes that hit the country, the worst impacted communities are still without safe shelter, clean water, without sanitation, without stable electricity, without health care, and without essential services. Humanitarian organizations continue to deliver assistance and support local responders. In the first 10 days after the disaster, more than 240,000 people were reached with supplies on food. Over 100 metric tons of medical supplies have arrived, and mobile health teams are providing trauma care, essential medicines, and psychosocial support. Despite these efforts, the scale and urgency of the disaster demand greater action, resources, and access. The flash addendum to the 2025 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan for Myanmar, which called for $275 million, has mobilized $180 million as pledges and commitments, yet only $28 million has been dispersed so far. We urge donors to make pledges to disperse it now and call on those who have not made pledges to do so and to give generously. The international community must step up support during this critical period to ensure the already severe humanitarian needs of people in Myanmar do not deepen further. Today's an interesting day. What is today besides Monday? It is the World Creativity and Innovation Day. It is a reminder that human creativity and innovation at both the individual and group levels has become the true wealth of nations in the 21st century. Edie, try to be creative.
I don't think I'm going to be
Yeah.
creative. 2 questions. First, on Ukraine, does the Secretary General have any comment on the resumption of serious attacks and fighting in Ukraine following what was supposed to be an Easter ceasefire?
I mean, exactly that, right? We took note of the announcement of a ceasefire, and we have taken note also that both sides continue to fight. We once again call an end to this war, in line with relevant UN resolutions, international law, and the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
And on the other great war, there are reports that there are proposals for a possible new peace deal in Gaza, and that Hamas representatives and others are going to meet the Egyptians and the Qataris.
Let me put it this way. We're not directly involved in these talks. We have seen these reports before. All we can hope for is for an agreement to be reached to ensure that humanitarian aid once again flows freely and unhindered into Gaza, that hostages held in Gaza are reunited with their families, that those in administrative detention in Israel, those Palestinians, are also reunited with their families, and that we return to a path of peace for the two peoples. Pam?
Thanks, Steph. I know we're going to hear from David Carden, the Syria coordinator, but are you hearing anything? We've gotten a lot of reports from the ground that both Alawites and Christians are being killed and women taken away, but also more recently that houses are being taken by those in Hama and other places.
We've seen these reports, which are extremely disturbing, and again, it's a sign that the authorities in Damascus need to ensure that every minority, every religious minority, ethnic minority, feels safe and protected in the new Syria. And I see David online. I know he will speak to Syria. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Follow-up. You took note the fact that Israel has dismissed a commander for the incident on March 23rd, and that the Israeli military has admitted to what they call professional errors. Does the Secretary General consider this case closed or not?
We're not involved in this investigation. What I can tell you is that there have been, for more than a year, there has been repeated violations of international law, repeated atrocities committed. There needs to be accountability, and serious accountability, for all those who've committed them.
The PRCS is calling for the UN to take part in their own investigation. Would you be open to that?
As you know, we would need some sort of a mandate to conduct any sort of investigation. Amélie.
Thanks, Steph. About the climate summit on Wednesday, can you give us some kind of list or a few names of
we will. I mean, I think we'll try to get them to you today, but I think more likely Selwyn will give them to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Because people, heads of states and governments are like all of us. We all sometimes reply rather late to a party.
But can you tell us a little bit more about what the point of closed doors virtual meeting? I mean, what the aim of the meeting?
Well, first of all, I think it's to create a real energy for success for COP. Some diplomacy is public, and a lot of COP will obviously be public, but I think it is important for these heads of states and governments and others to be able to express themselves freely and have an open and frank discussion. Dennis, and then Sinan, and then Lenka.
Hello, Steph. Does UNSG anticipate or plan to attend Pope Francis' funeral?
I think let's see when there's a date, and then we will update you on that. But we're fully aware of that possibility. Sinan, then Lenka.
Thank you, Steph. I have a couple of questions, if you can stay with me. First, I have heard Foreign Minister of Syria, Mr. Shibani, is coming to UN this Friday to participate in Security Council meeting, and I wonder if he's going to meet anybody else, I mean, including Secretary General, any UN officials.
I expect to have a bit more detail for you on that later in the week.
Quick follow-up, if he's coming and if he's going to meet with Secretary General, what will be Secretary General's message to him? I mean, what will be the top priority for Secretary General?
Well, I mean, I think the Secretary General's message to the Syrian authorities, you've heard repeatedly from Geir Pedersen. I think Geir will also be here last week. It's about creating new structures in Syria that are representative of the mosaic that are the Syrian people, to ensure that there's accountability, to ensure that voices are heard, and also a message for the international community in supporting that effort. Lenka.
Thank you, Steph. So Russia has noted about 5,000 violations by the Ukrainian side of the ceasefire. At the same time, the overall military activity decreased. Would the Secretary General like to see it extended, even though it wouldn't be perfect? And at the same time, what is he doing recently? What actions is he taking to sort of, help this conflict ended? Thank you.
Well, as you know, our colleague Rebecca Greenspan had been in touch with the various parties involved in the discussions, and we continue to do that. We want to see an end to this war, to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in line with international law, in line with the relevant UN resolutions and everything I've said earlier, just a few minutes ago. Pam, and then we'll go to our guest, who's been extremely patient.
Just a quick, is there anything planned for the UN's 80th birthday on Friday? Or mainly September, when?
Yeah, I mean, this is not about having a party. I think the Secretary General is marking the 80th anniversary of the UN with the UN 80 initiative, which is a serious piece of work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Cardin, you look ready to go. If you could put him on the screen.